Welcome to some very basic reflections on the spirituality of gratitude. All of us are familiar with the opening verse of Psalm 103, and it goes as follows: Bless the Lord, O my soul, all that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. If you briefly, even casually consider this verse, you will find the psalmist underlying two important points. The first is that our life is full of God's blessings. Secondly, people do not remember God's blessings. They certainly do not remember all his blessings. We tend to forget the blessings of God. And it's an aspect of human nature that we tend to focus more and more on what has been denied to us or what we lack or the unpleasant experiences of life. If you examine a relationship, a friendship, or even a basic relationship like husband-wife relationship, you will find that all the good things that you have done are forgotten, and one casual mistake is remembered forever. People remember each other more through hurts and disappointments than through the beautiful, joyful times that they shared. The same is also our relationship with God. We may have received 1,000 blessings, but we will forget all of that in a moment if our expectations with regard to a certain thing which we so ardently desire are not immediately fulfilled by God. Or if we happen to uh, get into troubles and difficulties, and immediately you say, Why me, God? Why me? So, the incapacity for gratitude is a very serious problem. And it's also a reflection on our spiritual underdevelopment. For a spiritually sensitive person, everything is an occasion for thanksgiving. Such a person realizes that everything is God's blessing, everything is God's gift, and every gift of God is an occasion for thanksgiving because every gift is a blessing. However, we tend to take almost everything for granted, and therefore our life lacks the joy and the celebration, the vitality of thanksgiving. The capacity for thanksgiving is the hallmark of a spiritually healthy life. And I cannot but connect it to Jesus' statement that he came that everyone may have life and life in its fullness. It is absolutely certain that anyone who lives life in its fullness will be overflowing with gratitude. On the other hand, those who are living and partly living, those who are living in indifference to the great possibilities in their life and oblivious of the many blessings in their life, they will be full of grumbling and they will live like uh, a vessel of ever increasing resentment and disappointment. Their personality will be overshadowed by the clouds of negativity and complaints. And I don't have to say this to you that it's a pain to be with such people. They will kill the joy of life without even knowing it and without even wanting to do so. So, the worst punishment that can happen to a human being, I believe, is the incapacity for gratitude, which is symptomatic of a life lived between sleep and wakefulness, or a life of mere existence. One of the saints that I have always admired, without being able to emulate him, is Saint Francis of Assisi. And his biographers tell us that the hallmark of the personality of Saint Francis of Assisi was his imperative need to express his gratitude to God. His life was one long poem of gratitude to God. He could never tire himself of expressing gratitude to God. That's because he lived well. In a short while from now, I'll be reading out a passage from G.K. Chesterton's biography of St. Francis of Assisi, a book that I have referred to in one of my earlier videos. Now, going back to the psalmist and his exhortation that we should be grateful to God and never refrain from or never fight shy of expressing our gratitude to God. The capacity for gratitude comes out of the positivity of our personality. The core of thanksgiving is giving. So, thanksgiving is an aspect of the giving personality that we must cultivate. Now, the benchmark of the giving personality of Jesus Christ, all of his life was one continuous act of giving. In fact, that's a measure of human greatness. Unfortunately, from the worldly perspective, greatness is always associated with getting and grabbing. The great ones of the world want to hold everything to themselves, and they would like to get much of what others need as well. Now, today, of course, there is a great deal of talk about President Trump wanting to make America great again. This idea of making America great again is that of getting everything from all other countries in the world in order to make America the final resting place of the wealth of the world. Now, at the same time, he is also hailed as the foremost defender and exponent of Christianity and the way of Jesus Christ. I leave it to you to judge for yourself how these things can cohere. Since Trump is not my subject, I will not go any further with that reference. However, if you recall that very interesting and traumatic conversation at the White House involving President Zelensky, Vice President J.D. Vance, America has never had such a vice president, and President Trump, in order to please his boss, J.D. Vance lambasted President Zelensky for his incapacity for gratitude. He said, "You have not said a word of gratitude to the American president for the great things America has done for you," which is factually not correct, but that's not our idea. Now, whether J.D. Vance as a person exemplifies the spiritual merit of gratitude, I do not know. I don't think any one of you would be in a position to say yes or no. But going by the personality, the personal flavor, I am at least extremely skeptical that he is a person of gratitude. That's up to him and his maker. But I certainly agree with J.D. Vance that human beings, no matter how high they are, must have this grace, this spiritual beauty of gratitude. Ingratitude makes us ugly, both in the sight of God and in the experience of our fellow human beings. One of the most beautiful pictures that you can get from the Gospels is in the 7th chapter of Luke's Gospel, where Jesus is in the house of a Pharisee called Simon, invited there to have a meal with this important religious functionary, Simon the Pharisee. And then, almost as uninvited, a woman comes, a woman with a past, and she begins to express her gratitude. And Luke deals with it so beautifully, almost poetically. I do not want to comment in detail on that passage. I would only request you to read that passage and see the poetry of gratitude. How a person forgets herself, forgets the context, forgets the whole world because of the power of expressing gratitude. That is genuine gratitude. Gratitude for the blessing that she has received at the hands of Jesus Christ. And the supreme quality of that blessing is that by receiving the blessing of God, you become a blessing. It's not that you've received some blessings, but you become a blessing. That woman, she's not given a name there. She's the woman, and therefore she represents all of the women folk. She cannot thank Jesus Christ enough. She does not know how to thank him enough. And therefore, she uses the most feminine way of expressing her gratitude. She washes the feet of the Master with her tears and wipes his feet with her hair. That's a poetry of gratitude. You don't need money. You don't need the material resources of the world. You don't have to throw a banquet in a 7-star hotel. You don't have to splurge and splash wells. If you have genuine gratitude, the poetry of that will find a spontaneous expression. And no one is a better exemplar of this truth than this woman that you find in the 7th chapter of Luke's Gospel, who cannot but express her gratitude to God because she has realized that from being a byword of shame, Jesus has transformed her into a blessing for others. That is the true blessing. Now, when G.K. Chesterton talks about St. Francis of Assisi as an embodiment of spiritual gratitude, he says that the saint used to thank God for, and I'm going to quote from my memory, for the towering miracle of mere existence. It's worth remembering these words, beautiful words. St. Francis used to thank God even for the towering miracle of mere existence. I wonder how many of us really think of mere existence, the mere fact that we exist, the mere fact that we are alive, as a towering miracle. But that's a fact. Life is a miracle, and being alive is a miracle. But we are not aware of it, therefore, we don't give thanks to God for the towering miracle of mere existence. So, the capacity for gratitude you find globally declining. And I have no hesitation in saying that even as we are alienated from God, we lose the capacity to live our life meaningfully, zestfully, fruitfully, joyfully. And to that extent, we also forfeit the capacity for true gratitude, spontaneous gratitude. So, true gratitude is related to the quality of life that we lead. And this, of course, is very clear from the parable of talents. The good and faithful servants are full of gratitude to the master. They just could not wait for the master to come so that they could submit to him, present to him what they have gained through their hard work as the silent articulation of their authentic gratitude. On the other hand, the wicked servant has only complained, and he goes to the extent of verbally attacking the master for entrusting the talent with him. And look at the misery of his existence. And if we lose the capacity, or if we don't develop the capacity for thanksgiving, we would be like this third servant who simply won for himself a life of misery. So, the psalmist is dead right when he says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name." All that is within me. bless his, and forget not all his benefits. Now, let me conclude this time together by reading to you, if I can quickly locate it, that passage I have in mind from the biography of St. Francis of Assisi by G.K. Chesterton. I recommend this book to you to read. I can assure you that you will feel joyful that you have read the book if you care to. So now this is how Chesterton uh, talks about the saint's capacity for gratitude, rather the saint's need to continually express his gratitude to God or give thanks to God. He understood, Saint Francis of Assisi understood down to its very depths the theory of thanks, the theory of thanks. And its depths are a bottomless abyss. There should be no limit to our gratitude. He knew that the praise of God stands on its strongest ground when it stands on nothing. That is, we feel grateful to God, and our need to express thanks to God will know no limits if we realize that we are existing on the ground of God, and that without God there is nothing worthwhile left in us, that we are a mere nothing but for God. So everything, the very foundation of our existence is provided by God. Rather, God himself is that foundation. As Paul says in the Acts of the Apostles, quoting from Greek literature, God is the ground. In him we live and move and have our being. For we have to be grateful to God for the very fact of our being. So he knew that we can best measure, the expression I quoted comes here. St. Francis knew that we can best measure the towering miracle of the mere fact of existence if we realize that but for some strange mercy we would not even exist. Our mere fact, the fact of mere existence, is an occasion or is the ground for thanksgiving to God. And something of that larger truth is repeated in a lesser form in our own relations with so mighty a maker of history. He also is a giver of things we could not have even thought of for ourselves. He also is too great for anything but gratitude. From him came a whole awakening of the world. Now he is talking about Francis. He says, just as Francis was grateful to God, we need to be grateful to Saint Francis of Assisi, because from him came a whole awakening of the world and a dawn in which all shapes and colors could be seen anew. Saint Francis has enabled us, those of us who care to understand his life, his spiritual sensitivity, and the sort of person that he was. He has, uh, to them, he has done this great blessing, this great service of enabling them to see the whole of life, the whole of the world anew, in fresh colors, in fresh meaning, in fresh vitality, in fresh hope. That's a tremendous service to humanity. This is the true service to humanity. This is a spiritual blessing that we can share with each other, celebrating the goodness of life. And that is possible only. A gift can be celebrated in its sincerity only if we respect the giver of the gift. Now, unfortunately, that giver of the gift has been distorted and caricatured by human beings by making God a caricature, or by making 1,000 caricatures of God, each one recreating God according to his or her image. At the same time, saying that there's only one God, and that God, that God is my own God. Your God is wrong. My God alone is right. Just as the Orthodox Church saying to the Jacobite Church, my our patriarch alone is genuine. Your patriarch is fake. Orthodox Jacobite Church will say to the Orthodox Church, our patriarch is genuine. Your patriarch is fake. And all churches do this to each other. Only my church is genuine, your church is fake. Now, if all churches say to each other, my church is genuine, your church is fake, then the only conclusion is, the only thing that the world will understand when this is noticed by the world is that all churches are fake. For example, if CSI church is fake in the eyes of Orthodox church, because if a CSI girl is to be married into Orthodox church, the Orthodox church will insist on converting her, because a CSI girl is not seen as a Christian by the Orthodox church. So the Orthodox church would think of the Catholic church as a fake church. The Catholic church will see the Pentecostals as fake. Pentecostals will see the Marthamites as fake. The Marthamites would see the Orthodox as fake. Believers' church would see everybody else as fake. So everybody is fake, which is true. Perhaps that is true. And therefore, we need to really wonder what we have made of this beautiful gift of God. And because of this, we are not in a position to give thanks to God because we do not know God. And to the extent that we do not know God, we do not know how to live our life well. And therefore, we are increasingly losing the capacity for gratitude, because gratitude is the offspring of living our life in all its fullness. Thank you. All the best.